Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Noah, and in this video, we are going to be talking about guns. This is not real, by the way. That's a fake gun. But yeah, this video, I want to take some time to share some stats. Well, not specifically stats. I'm going to share some facts, I should say, and some of my personal opinions on the significance between the gun ownership laws between Japan, which is the strictest, arguably, in the entire world, and the United States here, which is probably the easiest. The whole reason why I wanted to make this video in the first place was because the last time I was in Japan, a few months ago at this point, I had the idea of, I wonder what it would be like to actually go hunting in Japan, because it is such a rare thing to actually own a firearm there. I thought, man, it would be kind of cool to be able to go hunting. And one of the things that certain parts of Japan are kind of struggling with right now are the abundance of bears in certain areas. And they're looking for hunters to actively go out and kind of reduce the total number of bears that are kind of in these specific regions for safety, for as nuisance and stuff like that. So I wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive as to what the criteria would be for myself, for example, to actually get a gun in Japan, and then compare that to what it would be like here in the United States. So with that intro out of the way, I'm going to start with ownership in the United States. What is ownership like here? What do we need to do to get our hands on a firearm? And I did do some research, took a couple notes, as you should. So I'm going to just briefly go through kind of the criteria, kind of the steps in order to obtain a firearm here. The first thing that is important here in the United States is that there is a very large variety of firearms that you can buy. You can buy handguns, you can buy certain semi-automatic weapons that have 30-round magazines, 40-round magazines, etc. In some places, you can get fully automatic ones. You can get shotguns, rifles, very long-range rifles, and so on. So the first thing you would do is decide what kind of firearm you want, just from the list that I kind of briefly just mentioned, and then you would actually go to a certain location to buy one, right? So it would either be a dealer generally, or like a local dealer, a public dealer, or like a private sale. I did find out that when you go to, your sporting goods shop, whatever it is, generally speaking, they are going to run a background check in store that day to make sure that you meet certain criteria. I did read that certain private dealers actually don't run a background check, and you can go in and probably just maybe have an ID, for example. I've never bought one. I don't know. This is just what I read, and you can then you can get a firearm that way. Now, what makes you not eligible here in the United States to get a firearm, right? The first thing is age, right? You can't be 5 years old, but the most important part is your background check. So what are these background checks, these very instant FBI lookup checks, looking for? The first thing that they are looking for is you cannot have a felony on record that is punishable by more than 1 year in prison. I don't know what that list entails. Maybe it's different between states. I don't know, but that is significant, right? The second thing is you cannot have a history of domestic violence, right? Pretty self-explanatory. Third is you cannot have a restraining order. Fourth, you cannot have certain drug charges on record, right? You can't be a dealer caught being Walter White or whatever. The fifth is you cannot have been put into a mental institution forcibly, i.e., someone made you go there, right? It's not, I guess it would be a little bit different if you kind of self-enrolled, which is good, but also kind of bad at the same time. But one of the things that they look for is, are you crazy enough to have been put into a home at some point in time without your consent? And the last thing that I was able to see was you cannot have a dishonorable discharge on your record from the military, right? And that's kind of an area where I don't have much experience, if I'm being honest, but that is the general criteria that the background check, the instant background check, is looking for when you buy from a dealer that actually does the background check. Like I said, you can buy from certain private sellers, from what I read, that do not do that, but that's pretty much it, right? You can walk away that same day with your gun. You just give them the cash. You can buy ammunition. And that's basically it. You can go into the store, and an hour later, less than an hour later, you can come out with a gun and probably all of the ammunition that you'd want. So it's a pretty quick turnaround if you actually want to get your hands on a gun and you don't have a pretty severe background check, right? So now I want to go into the criteria in Japan, which is a little bit longer a list. The first difference is there is limited availability, right? In Japan, you cannot get handguns. You cannot get semi-automatic. You will definitely not get any kind of fully automatic weapon. You are only limited to a shotgun or a rifle, and that's pretty much it. And another important thing to note that is relevant to the point that I just made there is that you can't actually buy a rifle right from the beginning. You actually need to own a shotgun for, they say, a minimum of 10 years before you can apply to own a sniper rifle, right? A very long range rifle, which in my opinion is a little bit maybe excessive, but that's how it's written in Japan, right? So even if you want a gun, you want a handgun or whatever, first off, you can't get that. And if you want a long range rifle, you have to first get accepted to own a shotgun, own that for a year, and then you can apply to purchase a long range rifle. Now, the first step that you need to do in Japan is you need to apply for a gun safety course. These happen maybe once a month from what I was reading. So you apply, you pay a fee to get into one of these classes, and they, happen on a weekend, couple hour class. And, that goes over general safety. It goes over laws. It probably goes over different stats, different incidents that have happened in the past, and so on. After this class, you are required to take an exam that covers all of these rules, regulations, incidents, everything, basically safety. And this is a written test that you will take, I think, the same day after you have that lecture, all in Japanese, and you need to have a score of at least 70 in order to move on to the next steps. After you've passed that test, you then move on to a physical test. So this is going to be actually holding rifles, shooting, safety, target practice, mobility, all of those kind of things. So you can only do that after you've passed your exam, in the previous step. After you take your exam, both your physical exam and your paper exam, your written exam, you then need to go into, your local doctor, and there's a certain type of, certain tests that they actually run on you both physically and mentally. So these tests, from what I read, are actually looking to see if you were a drug user. They probably take strands of hair. They probably do blood work. You probably have a physical to make sure you're not, that you can move around accordingly and stuff like that. But more importantly, they have a mental examination, right? So you might meet with a psychiatrist, whatever it is, to do, general questions to make sure that you're in the proper mental state, right? That's basically what this test is trying to account for. So after all of this is done, right? Lecture, written test, physical test, and then your medical side, right? That's all of your internal stuff, mental stuff. There's going to be a lot of paperwork there, and you submit all of that paperwork to the police station. And then at that point, the police will actually do their side, right? So this is where things get a little bit obscure, where I couldn't find that much information online, but it's basically listed as your local police departments, and probably the state, the country police will actually do their internal investigation. They will look into your finances. They'll look into your job history. They'll talk to your neighbors. They'll interview your family. They will just be basically trying to see if anybody in your vicinity has any kind of beef with you, basically. If anybody has heard of you doing anything kind of suspect, if you do just weird things, they're going to hear about it, right? The other thing, like I mentioned in the first part of this, is they're going to look into your finances, right? This is kind of a kind of a big deal, right? Because this is kind of something that I believe is pretty important when it comes to, uh, you know, purchasing something that can do a lot of harm. You want to be pretty stable, right? You don't want people having weapons that are not in good shape financially in the world today. Some people might say that's a bit prejudiced, but it is, I think it is kind of a reality. The next thing that you will need to do after this is actually buy two safes. You need to buy a safe for the gun that you're hopefully going to buy, and you're going to need to buy a safe for the ammunition to go along with the gun. Two separate safes. They need to be two separate safes. And you're probably thinking, well, and this is what I thought, why? So if I'm buying a safe, like, can I buy one? Like, is that an indicator that I have been approved? The answer is no, apparently. Apparently, you buy the safes, you set them up at your house in a secure location, you have the police check them before you even know if you have been accepted to buy a gun, right? So your safes are going to just sit there empty. The police, you need to schedule the police to come over to your house, check the safe, make sure they're in a good spot, make sure they're functioning, make sure they're up to code, they're not cheap, they can't be wood, etc. And then from there, after all of that, the police will go back, and then the Public Safety Commission will evaluate all of your paperwork, all of your exam, your physical, the police investigation into your background, and then they will make the decision if you are eligible to buy a firearm. So you can see that the steps in order to even qualify to buy one in Japan is just unbelievable. I mean, this takes months. What I just went over, those steps, the medical exam, the physical, you can't just do it in a weekend, right? It takes, apparently, at the earliest, 3 months of interviews, checkups, exams, paperwork to be able to actually get your written permission from the government, basically, to say, okay, you're able to buy one. We trust you enough to buy one. And I do want to make this clear before I kind of talk further about my opinions on the two processes, is that I actually am pro ownership. I've shot guns in my life, handguns, shotguns, rifles, etc., and they are a lot of fun. If I'm being quite honest with you, they are a different kind of rush, I would say. Could I do it every day? Is it my everyday passion? Absolutely not. But I do believe that, they are kind of an important part of history, and there are a lot of people that like just that aspect of them and like to go to the range, right? I think that's fine. Now, this is where my own personal opinion comes in, right? Even though I am pro ownership, I am against everybody owning them. I think we've gotten to the point in the United States here, and this is my opinion, like I said, where it reminds me of the story of Prometheus, right? And I hope I haven't lost you, right? Just hear me out for a second here. So the story of Prometheus, from my understanding, from what I recollect, is he was a god who gave fire, your fire, right? You guys know what fire is, to the humans so they could use it to forge and cook or whatever. And he was punished by his fellow gods, and he was punished every day. He was basically killed every single day for eternity. I don't know if that's exactly the story, but it's pretty similar. And that's kind of the way that I think about firearms here in the United States, is that we've been giving them out basically left and right to many people that probably didn't need them, 2 didn't deserve them, 3 really shouldn't have had them, right, mentally. For so long that it's gotten to the point where I feel like we're almost too deep into it. And you can just look online, you can look at the stats of how much violence occurs in the United States alone with firearms. I can recall 2 successful assassinations that happened this year, both with firearms. And there were school shootings. There was a church shooting. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And this is because we have them. We have firearms out in the public for basically anybody and everybody. Now, this is where some people might have an argument, of, well, everybody deserves one. We should all have one type of deal. And for me, if I was a like a gun ho guy, right? Gun ownership guy, which I'm not. I feel like I would almost want less people to have them because I want it to be more prestigious. That is the way that it is in Japan, right? If you own a gun in Japan, you are that guy. You are him, right? For the younger kids out there, because because of how much they look at, right? If you have a gun, if you meet someone, right? You meet someone on a dating app, they say, "Oh, I own a gun." In Japan, that instantly says, "Wow, this person is mentally solid, physically solid. They're smart. They've got money, right? Their family likes them. Their employer likes them. Their neighbors like it. It shows it is prestigious. It's kind of like an honor, right? It is prestige to have. It's not a right; it's a privilege to be able to own a firearm in Japan and actually use it for hunting, use it for skeet shooting, whatever it is. Versus if everybody's got one, it kind of belittles that importance, right? It belittles that significance of what kind of experience these things can do, and more importantly, what kind of damage that they can do to cities, to families, to countries. You can get a bad rep as a country if you have a lot of firearm related violence, which is unfortunately what I think a lot of other countries look to the United States as. These assassinations, for example, they don't stay on your local news station, right? These are global stories, right? They're global. They're all over the place. And I want to give you guys a good example. So when I was in Japan, I was talking to someone who was about to go to college. And one of the biggest things, for foreign students is to go to college in the United States, right? I'm not going to get into it. Just there's a lot of schools here. It's easier to get in most cases, a good experience, etc. And I asked this person, do you want to go to the States, right? Do you want to go to UCLA? Do you want to go to somewhere in Arizona? Do you want to go to somewhere in Texas, right? Where I am. And their answer was, no, I don't really want to get shot, right? And although this is kind of a dark humor joke, it is a real fear I think that people have, right? Because, like I said, so many people have this fire, right? No pun intended, firearm. But there's so many people that shouldn't have them, that do, that it has, in my opinion, gotten to the point where is it too late? Is it too late to reverse things? Are there just so many out there on the market that this kind of violence is just going to continue and continue and continue until something very drastic is done, or until we all die, of old age, hopefully. And it's kind of, I think it's a, important thing to kind of ruminate on as a country, because, like I said, the damage that these items, these firearms can inflict on cities, countries, families is irreversible, right? When we're talking about like human lives here, it's not like, oh, I crashed my car, oh, that person hit my car. You just get a new car, right? Get your insurance in there. When you take a life, there's no going back. And that is a extremely serious thing for me. And I think maybe I'm hoping I'm not alone in this country to kind of feel that way of maybe we have gone too far with ownership. The other important thing, I don't want this video to go on too long, but it is something that I think is really important in these times here in the United States. But one of the other important things that I didn't mention from the list in Japan is that you actually need to continually take the physical exam, and you continually every 3 years need to get a mental check and drug check in order for it's a renewal process basically. So you don't just buy one and say, all right, I'm good for life. You're going to be in that doctor's office in 3 years, and they're going to ask you the same questions, see how you're doing, check your blood, make sure you're okay, and this to me is one of the most important aspects of gun ownership, is that, like I said, they have the power to just inflict unreal amount of damage, right? And the issue for me is that why wouldn't we want to ensure that the people that own these firearms aren't in good mental standing? The interesting thing with humans is that our mental status changes over time. You can have someone that is on top of the world one year, right? They've got a great job, money, family, like just a great life. And then a year and a half later, they lose their job. They get into gambling. Their wife leaves them. Their kids hate them, and their mental state is completely different. And, if you think about it, the people that do acts of harm with guns at school shootings, at, when church shootings, whatever, these people aren't mentally right. That's the consensus, is that you don't go in there, right? Oh, I'm feeling great today. I feel really normal. I'm mentally stable, and light up a place, right? You don't do that. These people are sick, they're sick in the head. And it gets to the point where maybe if we would have had at least some of these checks that Japan does, maybe some of these could have been caught. Or maybe all of them could have been caught. Because at the end of the day, like I said, not this. Like I said, this one's fake. This is a toy, but it looks kind of real. But these things have the power to just inflict unreal amount of damage, and we need to take that seriously. I feel like we need to make ownership a privilege. We need, so if you see someone who has one, your mind goes to, wow, I do really feel safe, rather than look at this hillbilly with a gun, on his waist, like Dwight in that one Office episode. And that's how it is in Japan, right? Because if you see someone that owns one, you know that they really, really wanted it. They really worked hard. They're employed. They've got a good family, etc. Versus here, you've got a lot of the perpetrators just don't have the best situation just overall. So it is a kind of a difficult topic, I think, for a lot of people, but I wanted to share my thoughts to see if we can learn something from a country that is on the other side of the spectrum. Now, it's really cool because they still manage to give guns out to people, but they just make sure that it is to the right people. But there are my thoughts on gun ownership between here in the United States and Japan. Basically polar opposites when it comes to gun ownership. But like I said, in Japan, they still manage to pull it off. They're just doing it, I think, the right way. If you have any other thoughts that I didn't really cover in this video, or if you want to tell me that you hate my opinion or you hate me for whatever reason, you can leave those thoughts in the comment section below as well. I would love to read them. As always, if you've stuck along this far in the video, thank you so much, and I hope to see you again sometime soon.